Testing. Any confirmation that I'm live will be greatly appreciated. Mm, I guess I am. I should be, right? So the next few hours, and I hope to make it under. Actually, I allocated 3 hours to this, but the more I think of it, the more I realize that it should be like a 2 hour lecture with a break somewhere in between. Is dedicated to crossdock. All about crossdock. There's a lot of misconceptions about crossdock, how it operates now. Of course, this may go totally outdated in a year, even though the crossdock function has been around for more than a year now. I think. Don't remember exactly where it launched when it launched, but it was quite some time ago. I imagine somewhere along the pricing updates, which was like fall 2019, I guess. Um, yeah, somewhere around that time. And yeah, so crossdock is an interesting topic. It's not the first thing that you explore when you get into Coda. It's something that you start looking into later down the road. When you start creating a bunch of documents and you want to interconnect these documents, then you use crossdock. So what crossdock is, basically, in simple words, it's a way to get some data from your doc A into your doc B. One important thing is that you cannot cross-dock pages, content in pages. This is just for the table content, only for the data that lives in your tables. So you can only cross-dock, import the tables or parts of the tables. You can make views which limit what gets exported. Again, I guess we will have to get our vocabulary straight first, because I'm using a lot of terms, and very often when people are asking me about crossdock, they are talking in different terms. It's hard to understand each other. So let's go from the very start, the theoretical start. So Coda has packs, right? So packs, what is packs? Packs is some logic that is not executed in your browser, but it's executed on Coda servers. So this is the packs infrastructure. So the functions that you write in your doc, the functions that you have, the formulas, or I call them functions. Watch the fundamentals for that. They all execute in the browser. And what packs does, it gives you some functions that execute or get calculated on the server side of Coda, on the Coda servers. That's why there is like this trigonometry pack, which is all those sines, cosines, the math, so trigonometry. It's not instantaneous, it takes time to sync. That's because this is not a native Coda function, even though it could be. It could use JavaScript's math capabilities, but for some reason, I know not for some reason, they created the trigonometry pack to just test the infrastructure, if they could extend the number of formulas but by adding them as packs. So that's why it's on packs. But well, calculating sine, cosine, and all these things is slow because it makes a round trip to the Coda servers, gets calculated there, the result then gets loaded into the doc. So this is one thing how packs work. Another thing how packs can work is that they give you so-called sync tables. So when you, it's not just crossdock, it's Gmail, the list of mails, calendar integration, any other integration that gets you a table of things, Jira integration, whatever. This is called sync tables. We call this sync tables because these are the tables that sync to something. The packs infrastructure supports this syncing process. What happens essentially is that Coda sends a request like get, we start the sync, and what happens basically, it tries to get items either from whatever. Let's say there is a cloud somewhere, right? So the document the document is talking to a server, to a Coda server, and the Coda tells it, okay, load this data from you know where from, give it to us in some windowed, in a way of like collections of rows. And then this Coda servers does its magic. It talks to, I don't know, weather, Jira, calendar, whatever, and forms the response as rows, as a collection of rows in batches, usually in batches of 100 rows. That's why if you like sync the crossdock table, you can see that the rows are appearing in bulks of 100 rows. And then it inserts that data, it gets that data into your doc. It doesn't really insert it directly into your doc. It doesn't transfer them. It doesn't transfer them to your browser to calculate. It puts that data into the snapshot of your doc that gets processed on the servers, and then you get served that snapshot just as if some other collaborator on the same doc would have been making changes. So this is the technical side of sync tables. What you get, you don't really have to care about all that. This is just like an introduction to the whole thing. So it's basically the so-called I'm also wondering why my CPU is used so much. Something's taking a lot of resources. Not sure what, but okay, not your problem to care about. It's just usually it's not so hard on the CPU. So yeah, I lost my tempo. Just a sec. So yeah, what does this syncing is the, well, automation bot is a name for the server-side worker that gets your doc, opens it in a virtual browser back on the Coda servers. That's why it's a more of a heavyweight process. Normally, when you do edits in the doc, you do it in your browser. Your browser calculates all the things and just sends the operation saying change the value in this cell of this row to this number. And the server doesn't really check whether the value that you're sending is it valid, is it properly calculated. So the server does not spend resources on processing these edits into your doc. And well, a lot of people are complaining, right? Because that's not what you see. That's not what you really think about when you work with code. A lot of people are complaining that, okay, we do not have proper security in our docs. We don't have this, we don't have that, we cannot share a separate page. That's because I think, well, I believe that it was Coda's conscious design decision to avoid doing calculations on the backend to, well, not have to pay this much for the servers. Their servers are basically just taking the doc, giving you the blob, like one file. Now it's not one file, now it's split down into separate files because you have this progressive loading, and I guess they will go further with this, and maybe eventually you will have a single separate page sharing or something, and you can already ship a form with limited data set to use in that form and not expose the whole doc, but whatever. I mean, this was a conscious choice. The startup was growing. I guess they were still, they didn't have pricing back at the time. They didn't know whether they would grow, whether they would make money for it. So they wanted to cut down on server costs. And that's why they were not doing any processing on the server side. The server was just giving you the doc. You were making all the changes. Your browser was, well, your processor in your computer was spinning this through calculation processes. The edits were then sent back to the server as events. They were bundled into edits, and the edits were applied into snapshots. And then also these edits were distributed to whoever was also looking at the doc at the same moment. And if a person opened the doc, they got the latest snapshot plus a minimum queue of events that haven't been yet included in that snapshot. So this is basically how Coda infrastructure. I have no idea actually. I mean, it's not something that I know. They never shared it with me. It's just guesswork, right? It's guesswork, and I think it's a true one because this is how apps like this are normally written. I would have done the same thing if I were the engineer responsible for this. That's what I'm saying. As a developer, I imagine this is built this way. But then they added automations, then they added API access, they added crossdock, which piggybacks on API access and automations basically. And this called for server side. I'm sorry, I need to take a very short break. It's just my nose. I need to go and blow it. Okay, much better now. For a while. Let's see how long that will last. Still have this residual effects of having a cold, which is perhaps a residual effect of having COVID. Well, back to our topic. So yeah, and for automation to happen, now there was a need to set up a virtual headless whatever browser, so to open the dock like a regular user would. And opening a dock is not as simple as just adding a row to a file somewhere or is changing a value somewhere in the file. So you have to actually open it, calculate it. Especially, well, your automations are based on things that may not have been calculated in a while. There has not been a user who opened the dock in the browser. So the automation bot cannot make any assumptions about whether your dock is fresh, whether all the calculated columns are calculated freshly. Especially things that are dependent on now and today, especially on today, because today it can recalculate. The now thing, there is a problem with it. The automation bot, you cannot rely on it knowing the exact time when the automation runs. It takes the last timestamp of the last added to the dock. And so does random actually. It takes the last timestamp of the last added to the dock as a seed. That's why you can have the same random value used for multiple rows, because random kind of depends on the clock, which is like accurate, which doesn't give that effective randomness as pseudo random. But that's a different topic. That's not really relevant to crossdock. But what's relevant to crossdock is that for any crossdock operation to happen, basically, the Coda server, which is not does not have infinite calculation power, it puts this request in a queue. It opens the dock that it tries to read the data from or write the data to. So this all takes time. This is what I'm getting at. This all takes time to recalculate, to put this in the queue. The queue then comes to your dock, to your request. It then spins up the dock. It may take some time to calculate everything. Essentially, the similar amount of time that it takes for your browser to open the dock, right? Maybe faster because there's network. The network's faster. It's not loading it through the internet, but still, it takes some time to load and process the dock, to calculate it. So the first calculation may take some time. Then it reads then it has all the data that it needs to serve, or it has the changes, it knows of the changes that it has to make to insert into the dock. Then it shuts it down. So effectively, yeah, it opens like a browser window, does the thing, and closes the window down. So this is one thing to keep in mind. what's happening, right? This is basically, I don't know if a crossdock is working through a different channel or if it just piggybacks on the API, and I just described the process behind any API change. Quite possible, because API requests are, again, are also processed like that. If you look into the Coda REST API documentation, they will tell you that the actions are not immediate, they are put on a queue. There's like they give you an action ID, you can kind of query the state of that edit, whether it has been applied already or not yet. You can query that endpoint to see whether, whether the request has gone through. But there is no guarantee that it will go through immediately or in a minute or in 2 minutes, all depending on the load on Coda network, on the Coda servers now, I guess. Once again, I am not an engineer at Coda. I don't work at Coda. I haven't yet ever seen their code apart from the hidden formulas that they serve to the front end. So this is all speculation. This is all my guesswork. But my guesswork is based on how things are usually, how they are traditionally engineered. I have no reason to believe, I have all reasons to believe that Coda went by these principles like any other web app would, like any other engineer who goes through standard ways of learning things and standard ways of doing things. It's like the industry standard, and so far my assumptions in mostly have been correct by what I'm seeing. Kind of feel like it's like science. It's like physics, for instance. You at each at each age, in Middle Ages, now in modern physics, you see something happening and you explain it. You find a theory that explains it, and but then you find a better theory, a theory that explains it deeper. So it's quite possible that I'm mistaken and I'm believing in some, I don't know, Zeus making thunders, and in fact there's something more to it, but it gives you some, some big picture of how things are working. So this is the server-side processing, and then the sync tables. So sync tables are different from normal tables in that regard that what you get served is you get an information about some columns that are added by default to your sync table. You are given a number of rows, and you cannot change that number of rows yourself. So a sync table, you have no control. You cannot add rows to it. You cannot delete rows from it if it's, well, unless you do it in the source. So if you do it like if a calendar sync table, you have to go and delete the event in the calendar so that the row disappears, right? But you cannot do it directly in Coda. You cannot delete the row or add the row in Coda. What else? So it gives you the list of rows, and the number is controlled externally. That's what you can say. And same for crossdock. It gives you a number of rows that you can not change in this doc. And what else you get? For each row, you get an object, and very often it's what's an object? An object is the collection of keys and values, and a value can also be an object, an array of objects, just a value, a number, a text, whatever. I guess you've seen these things already. Let me maybe put myself in a small screen. I haven't yet been showing anything except the appreciation to my patrons who support my knowledge sharing efforts like this stream and many others. Well, I was just making well, I was just making these Patreon playground doc on the previous stream. So for sync tables, this is what you have. Like, this is your crossdock table. You have an object, and an object has properties, and some other nested objects. If you try and look into how this object, what's inside of this object, you will see that this is our this is our JSON. So this is the object that gets inserted into each row. So this is what the sync table serves to you. I know, can you delete this? Well, you cannot delete this column. Well, it doesn't let you delete this column, right? Because it's something that's controlled by Coda. So it gives you an object, and the same for Jira, for Google Pack, for whatever. The difference between this object and a row reference is that a row reference, within your doc, you have all the information about, so these things are also objects. This is an object. This is something that I'm teaching you in the fundamentals, right? So each row is an object, and the table describes what that object has. So imagine this row object. So this thing would have been described as an object with key handle value, well, header no user, key template and value this, key this and value this, for instance. This is also an object. So think a row from a table that has columns name, your row URL, tier name, etc. Only that there's no table. So these things are very similar in nature. Keys and values, columns and values, right? So in a way, this is very, very similar. And the references, yeah, it's like the array, the object of type array. The value is an array of multiple things. Right now it's references to another table, which we haven't loaded into this doc because we haven't loaded it, so they are broken at the moment. This will recalculate at some point when we bring that table in. So yeah, we have the row URL from the original table in the original doc. That's the handle that we can use to update this row or delete this row with cross-doc actions. And text label and, well, any other properties that may come with this doc. So what's important here to understand where it is? The sync table comes from the Coda backend. It doesn't let you delete, add, delete rows or modify the row object. And well, in each row, it gives you an object that has all the data for that row. So these things, the columns that it added to the sync table, actually they could not, they don't have to be there. What's important is that there's an object served into each row of this. What these columns do, effectively, they're just reading these things. So property name from object row, it's this. I change this to any other property, and these are just columns. So the only column that really is dictated by the server is the row column, which gives you an object, and everything else you can set up to your liking. This is like totally unrelated columns. They are totally unrelated to what happens in your table, in your original table. And this whole table is basically, it's a different thing. It's just, yeah, a table that has a defined number of rows, that has an object set to each row of it, an object that has some information about that sync source that we are reading from. But generally, this is an absolutely separate table. It has a separate, can we have it? Can we read it? It has a separate table ID. So this table ID is, well, here, and it's not the table ID of the, so this thing here. The table ID, I don't know if you can see it, the table ID of the table or the view, the table is this. This is a table that has like a totally different ID, so it's a separate table, and each column will have a unique column ID. It's not like this is in any way related. You can name it whatever. You can make it just a column that calculates whatever in your receiving doc. You can have a column that reads from the row object. Whenever you delete a column from the source, it will stop reading this property because the property will be gone. That's what you see when you rename a column in your source or you delete a column in your source. It would not delete the column from here. It would just become blank, and this thing will become invalid because it will not be able to find the property name anymore. I don't know if they've added recently, because what they've added recently, if you add a column to your source and it sees that this column hasn't been added to your receiving table yet, it will automatically add that column. I guess they were baffled by lots of people complaining that they had to re-import the table, even though they didn't have to. They could just see that the new column appeared in their row object as a new property. They could click at add column, and well, they didn't have to re-import the table. So this is something that people miss because they misunderstood how crossdoc works, what this table is. So yeah, this can be, yeah, reading a property from an object. This can be like a more complicated formula. If today, I don't know, weekday name is Sunday, then we read from row name, otherwise we read row tier name, whatever. And if it's Saturday, it's curious. So we can set these things up differently. The row object just becomes another variable, another thing that's available in the context of this row. This row.row object, and it has the fields that we can read this simply. We can make an object ourselves in Coda. We can like make an object with parse JSON, but it will not give you these tools to read the properties by just typing dot a property name. But let's say we can turn this to JSON, right? Parse it back to the object. This is basically the same thing as this, only that, okay, this has some, well, metadata that it's a sync column. It's treated a bit differently. So yeah, we have this, but this on the right is also, it's also an object, also with properties, only that from this object we cannot read like that, right? So there's more to objects in Coda. You can have these kinds of objects. This is what you'll get from the Jira pack, by the way, because there is no defined schema for an object. These objects do have the defined schema, more or less defined schema. These don't. So this is like, we could have anything else in here. But okay, this is taking it a bit too far from what we were trying to talk about. So, well, I don't know if we are going, yeah, we will have a break in like 20 minutes. So I guess, I hope this is clear about sync tables. What's important, you get a totally different table that's unrelated to the source in any way. The number of rows is dictated by the server. You cannot change it. And each row gets an object into it which has all the information about that particular entry, be it a row from the source table, be it an event in the calendar, be it a pull request in GitHub, whatever you're using. It comes in as an object, and what columns that are created either automatically for you, Coda automatically generates columns that read these properties. All that it's doing basically is something that you could do yourself. You could take that object and read one property from it. You could take that row object, read another property from it. It's just that what Coda does for you automatically. That's it. That's all to it, actually. That's all to it, honestly. Nothing else. And if it doesn't add you a column, you can totally go and add it yourself. And you can totally go delete a column here. It will not affect the source. Well, it will not affect the source. It will just read from this read-only object, or not read. You delete a column, so it just stops reading that particular field from this object. And you can go totally crazy, creative with these formulas. Simply use this as a variable. So yeah, this is effectively what cross-doc tables are. Now, it is very important that I said that a cross-doc table is a table on its own. Let's actually maybe move out from this example. Let's move into a different example. Let me create a... I wanted to create this project, and actually I think I started creating this project, and in a way this has some data already. I wanted to create a demo project on a crossdoc, on how crossdoc works, on different crossdoc scenarios, and some UI experiments. So there's this online classes platform, and it's very well, loosely, but it's based on the work that I did for an actual client. But I don't know what state these docs are in, because they were created by a person I thought I would teach to be my assistant, and I'm not particularly happy with how that turned out. So what I'll do, I'll create a new folder. So that one I'll probably delete. And it doesn't have this, yeah, no, anymore, use the template. So, oh, no. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take the starter template, the VIP starter template that I'm using for, is it the VIP starter template though? Yeah, it's the VIP starter template. And I'm gonna create a few docs. So, okay, I copy this into online classes. It's gonna be the teachers doc. I'm gonna copy this once again, the starter template, yeah. It's gonna be the students doc. I'm gonna copy it once again. I'll let it sit for a while, because I'll need it once again, I think, in the very end. This is gonna be our classes. So the scheduling classes doc. And let me copy this once again, yeah, to illustrate the point. This is gonna be our something like teachers dashboard. This will be like our scheduling doc. So it's a private. So the idea here, we have a separate doc with teachers. This is like the very basic setup of this thing. We have a doc with teachers, and perhaps it's a, well, it's a doc that some particular team in a company can manage. So they can add teachers, they can see their salaries, they track information about the teachers. So it's like the teachers team, okay? You share this doc with one particular team. Let's make a table of teachers. We make db teachers. I used the starter template only because it gives us many things, like gives us some ropes so that we don't have to set these things up manually that much. So let's say I closed our Patreon admin, and there were a perk that I was using the names of my patrons as short list names, long list names. So let's say Scott, Joe, Jonathan, and Jaron. Nice. That's like Johnny and Jopper. But you wouldn't get that joke because this is like a Ukrainian band, like sketch. They were doing a very trashy sketch show, and one of their series was Johnny and Jopper about two police officers. Like, so Scott, Jonathan, I think Jonathan, Scott, Joe, and Jaron. So these are our 4 teacher name. Display value, we have it. I don't think we need it in this particular moment, in this particular instance. And what you can see already, what I'm doing, and I guess I should maybe make it zoomed in a bit. In my starter template, you can already see that I'm including a UID column, which takes the row ID. Actually, it doesn't take the row ID, just the row ID, not just the number 1, 2, 3, 4. It takes the URL of the row, and the URL of the row stops for a new row for a brief moment until it's saved on the servers. It has this row UID format with 10 characters in it, and for rows that are saved to the servers, a row ID is added. Actually, this is how it used to work. Now it, even in play mode, it assigns a row ID to new rows. So this is now something you can depend on. But okay, I'm doing this. It could be anything. Let's say you don't want to somehow surface that it's your teacher with ID 1, teacher with ID 2. You think it would be unfair to share this information that, okay, this is teacher 1, teacher 2, teacher 3. You could use a different sort of UID, which is this row plus, or this row to text. Would give you, no, it wouldn't give you the same. It's this row plus the blank string to get the table and row ID, and you can split this by slash and take the last part. You could use these identifiers, doesn't really matter. Any identifiers, maybe you have some internal identifiers, teacher 1, 2, 3, teacher 2, 3, 4, teacher 6, 6, 6, whatever. So you have some identifiers for your objects that you are going to crossdock. These don't take much space, so if you're fine with using these, just go ahead and use these. You don't have, with that client of mine, we did actually use this long and randomized UID that doesn't give away the order of rows in the table. But if I were doing it now, I wouldn't. I would just probably go with these things because they take less space, and that's it. So yeah, we have our table of teachers. Let's make our table of students. Whom shall we add as students? Pretty much everyone else. Daniel, let me put this on a different screen so that I have this list of people. Again, display value, don't need it really. Name, because we don't currently, in this example, we don't really care about the columns. We can actually, teacher, we can have something like hourly rate, and we will have Jonathan would be like 250, and Scott would charge 120, and Joe would charge 160, and Jaron would charge 150. And the numbers are completely random, right? And there could be more columns like address, whatever, email, phone number, total earnings. We don't care in this example, right? We are not building a real thing. We are just, I want to show the point, illustrate the point. Now for students, we will have Daniel, Jeremy, Breno, Dennis, Marco, Dex. I don't know how to pronounce this thing. I know that this is Virginie, Ben, and Michael, and Nick. Yeah, we have, and we also used to have another Russian named Patron. I'm not sure if they are still with us. And for teachers, let's just name them with their last names so that we can easily tell apart students from teachers. Joe M and Jaron VH. I don't know if that's how you, if you have Van in your last name, if that's how you make it an acronym, but okay. So yeah, now we have our scheduling doc where we basically set up, we need to import. So we need to import teachers, students. We will have our classes. So yeah, teachers, students, and classes. And we need to sync now, get the data from doc A into teachers, get data from doc B into students, right? Very often, what I would see people doing is that they would go into their doc, like teachers. They would find their table. Of course, they would never name it DB teachers. They would just name it teachers. They would bring it over to here, right? And after realizing, so yeah, they bring the base table in here. Because, well, there's a table. And I think I'm just started bringing in the wrong table in here. So DB teachers. And then after doing that, what happens next? First, they realized they just made a mistake. They just imported the whole table with all the data. So nothing is filtered out. Maybe the list of teachers, maybe we have something like is active, and we know that these 3 are active and this one is not active anymore, and we don't need to bring them over, right? So we only need active teachers in our scheduling doc. Maybe there's like thousands of them, or like, well, not thousands, but there's dozens of them, and we keep historical record of all the teachers that have been with us throughout all our existence, but it's only a subset of teachers whom we can schedule, so we don't need to bring them all over, because after all, this inflates doc size. All these things, they take significantly more space in your doc than if this table was just added directly in this doc. There's this overhead. The overhead's coming from the existence of these objects, which, as I shown to you, quite a big, like, where was the J? Okay, I closed it down. So all that data is stored in each row, in addition to your columns where you get that data out of the object. So the object, the bigger it is, the more data it takes. That's one reason where it is inflated. Another reason where it is inflated is because every identifier that you have. So as I've shown you, yeah, the table ID, this one, right? The row ID, that one, that 10 letter ID, the RUI dash and 10 letters, right? In sync tables, the table ID is this. So not 10 characters anymore. It's like significantly longer. Row IDs. Well, there you have it. There's the table ID and here's the row ID. Again, not the 10 letters, it's like many, many more letters. It doesn't really, you know, on small tables doesn't matter. We are not counting bytes here. We are not running on the 500 kilobytes worth of memory computers anymore. Like Bill Gates said that it would be enough for everyone. No, we have lots of memory, we have like many other things to worry about. But when your tables grow into thousands of rows, and let's remember that this identifier is used on pretty much every lookup value that you have. So if you have somewhere a table where you are reading lookup values from like teachers and students, and that's what we're going to set up next, that's where you will have that inflated size. So in a way, that's why I've been always saying that not using crossdock, if you can avoid using crossdock, if you're just making lots of small docks, interconnected docks for the sake of making small interconnected docks, you should think twice, because you may be better off doing everything in one single dock instead of and if you never limit your data, like if you're loading, if you need all the teachers, all the students in your dock, for instance, you can do it and you don't have to separate access to these pieces. Maybe it's worth doing it in a single dock instead of splitting it down into multiple docks. But if you are splitting it down into multiple docks, this is the overhead that you will have on your dock size. And right now there is no way to, as Coda said, there is no reliable way to figure out what the dock size is now that they are moving away from single file approach to the progressive loading of the dock. So now it's sharded into multiple pieces. You can sort of add them together, but again, I don't know how. There's been this talk, and I also participated in this talk about the 125 megabytes limit. So when the dock grows beyond that size, or that's how it used to happen, that's how it used to be. When the dock grew beyond that size, those two files that were served previously, they grew beyond that size, crossdock stopped working. Basically any API stopped working. Automations stopped working. So anything on the server, and that's why I was explaining that thing in the beginning of the video. The servers created, like, opened a browser and loaded the dock. And not to abuse, and the servers have limited resources, right? They are not infinite for Coda. So that's why there was this limit that no one thought anyone would ever hit. But then, well, Paul came, and then a few more consultants came, and then a few more clients came who hit that limit. And that's when the dock became, and that limit basically put a cap on the, okay, if this dock is more than 125 megabytes, the Coda servers will not open it because, well, the queue is long, there's many people trying to do something with their dogs, there's automations running, there's API access, whatever. If we let our servers open that big dock, we don't know what will happen. You know, it may take all our resources and bring our infrastructure down. I think that was their concern with large docks. So if a dock was ever so slightly over 125 megabytes, the server would not open it for server-side processing And this means API requests would fail, cross-dock would fail, so we would not be able to read rows from that dock. We would not be able to run cross-dock actions and insert data into that dock. In the receiving side, we could do that. On the receiving side, we could do that. But on the side where the table is, we could not do that. And I don't know what the limits are right now, because actually just a month ago I've seen docks still working well above 125 megabytes. They were still working fine, cross-dock, everything was syncing. So even either they raised the limits or something else happened, or they are calculating it differently now. I don't really know, because they wouldn't tell me, except if you want to know how close your dock is to its limit, write to support and then wait for like 2-3 days for an answer. Fortunately, there's no way for me to check it now, and I would pretty much, if anyone's from Coda watching this, I would appreciate it a lot if this functionality appeared, was made available for consultants like me, because that's what I'm dealing with usually. Really big docks, docks that businesses depend on, we cannot have downtime, but well, this may happen. Back to our horses. So we just made a mistake. We imported the in teachers table. What people would often do, they would go to the DB teachers table, they would hide columns from here, they would filter the base table for, well, active is equal to checked, and this will help, because now when we sync the teachers, this column shall disappear, the data in this column shall disappear. Not immediately though, because it may take some time for the changes to get saved to the snapshot. The crossdock always reads from the last available snapshot, so it ignores all these small edits that get to the Coda servers. Coda servers reacts on these edits, as I said in the beginning of the doc. There's a queue, it applies these edits to the doc at some point. A snapshot is created. You can see when a snapshot is created, version history pretty much lists only the snapshots, so it doesn't have all the intermediate edits, it has the snapshots. And when that snapshot, when that change is saved to the snapshot, only then, why do we still have the hourly rate? What did we hide? I guess we didn't hide the hourly rate. Yeah, so we realized our mistake once again. We hide another column, it gets saved at some point to the servers. By the way, is anyone watching? Yeah, there's like yeah, a few people watching. Yeah, we just need to give it some time, because this may take, like, we don't have control over how long it will take for the snapshot to refresh. And the general feeling is that the bigger your doc is, the longer it will take for Coda servers to process it, to make a snapshot of it. So if it's a small doc, like one table, it's gonna be almost instant. If it's a doc like my starter template, it already has some tables in it. It's not huge. It's not like maybe under 5 megabytes, maybe even less, maybe like 3 megabytes worth of data. But we don't have any control over that. And yeah, another thing while we are waiting, this is something that people also don't understand about cross-dock tables. So in there, and I totally get them, I totally get their sentiment, because, well, this happens in Coda and this happens in Coda. So it's interesting how you cannot, from one Coda doc to another Coda doc, just send this message through the servers. It cannot just notify another doc that, okay, do the sync now, or, well, here's the change, apply it immediately, show it to the user immediately. Maybe at some point in the future Coda implements this, because okay, Google Calendar cannot communicate all changes to its events to a Coda doc. So that's why these sync tables are all built on the polling. So there's like a few ways to transfer data over any system. First, it's pushing, right? When a change happens and there is the code that as soon as the change happens, it triggers something. It sends the data to some place. Webhooks is a good example of it. If you listen on a webhook, and for instance, you set a webhook on a Typeform, and Typeform, when a form is sent, Typeform stores the responses and immediately triggers a webhook. And then there's some code that responds to that webhook being triggered, and the whole thing is instant. So the change is pushed instantly. Like Zapier, for instance, is listening on webhooks, or Integromat. The other thing is polling. And polling is the receiving, the side that is a source of some event. Well, a row is created or a Typeform is stored. It does not have that capability to trigger anything. So there's no way to set a webhook on it or otherwise set any trigger on it. So the only other way to do is to just once in a while check for changes and have some snapshot internally and know that, okay, this is like what Zapier does, right? It stores internally the state of objects, like the last email it processed, or the timestamp of the last row, the timestamp of the last change. And it just checks every 5 minutes or so, every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, every once in a while. It checks for changes, for whether there has been a change. And it compares so it always queries for like get the last 100 emails, for instance. And if it sees that the last 100 emails are the same 100 emails that it got the last time, or the latest timestamp is the same as it has stored internally, it knows that there has been no changes, no new rows added, no new emails added to it. And it will not do anything about it. But if it finds that something's different, then it knows that it can do a more thorough comparison and see that, okay, this, and this record are the new records, we need to react on them. Same applies to crossdoc now. There is no way that the teacher's doc notifies the scheduling doc that there has been a change in the teachers. So this doc is not aware of the scheduling doc at all at the moment. Again, this may change by the moment you are watching this and recording. This may change. Maybe they add this sort of messaging, this sort of notification between docs that there is a change. But so far, there is no such notification on the even for notifications system. There's no way a user is notified immediately about, they were assigned a row somewhere. This all happens only on the servers, only when that change hits the snapshot. So a server takes all these changes that happened in the doc, puts them on a queue, then the queue comes, the time comes to process this queue of changes. It goes through all of them. If there is an automation set up on row-based triggered, only then it triggers those row-based automations when it's getting saved to the snapshot, not immediately. That's why you have this thing where automations are not immediately triggered by your changes. They can be triggered in a minute, in 2, in 5 minutes, again, depending on how complicated your doc is, how big it is. So this all is one infrastructure. It all behaves in a very common way, and crossdoc as well. So there is no way to notify that change. Maybe the first thing they'll add is the way, and this is again just speculation. The first step, I guess, for more real-time crossdoc would be this automation-based triggers. So when a row is saved to the snapshot, a row-based trigger will trigger the sync in the receiving dock maybe, but so at the moment maybe it will become live at some point. But what's important is that this is set up with a polling mechanism, and the polling mechanism is that it doesn't only react on changes, it basically queries for the whole table every time. It just queries for the whole table. And this also is put in a queue, and that's why it's not an instantaneous process. You click refresh, it starts the sync. The sync is happening on the backend, so an automation bot. If you look into the version history, you will see that it's automation bot, which is just a fancy word for a server. So the change is happening server side. There are some other indications that this is happening server side. For instance, I used to find a hidden formula that I could trigger the sync, like force with a button, I could trigger the sync. But it would only work if that button was clicked by automation bot. If it was clicked by me, the sync would fail. So this is only done on the servers. And yeah, the limitation currently not to overload the servers is that you can only do this like automatically. You can only do this as often as once an hour. So set up an hourly sync. Pretty much like the automations that only run hourly. I think they even use the same scheduler there. Yeah, you can sync this, of course. You can trigger a manual sync, which is a good thing already that you have this. You don't have to wait for an hour to strike. But this works in a polling manner. So every time you refresh or every time an automation bot starts a refresh, what it does is it queries the table at source, it picks up on changes, edited rows, added rows, it resolves these changes, and then it just either updates the objects here, deletes the rows, adds the rows, and puts the objects there. So this is what's happening. This is how it is currently working, by querying another doc through the automation infrastructure. I think before we move any forward, I'll just make a short 5-minute break. Yeah, let me go have some rest, maybe make myself some tea. Time to get back. Class, take your seats. Yeah, I don't want for you to watch me stretching. Okay, so with all these things in mind, now we hit the column. Yeah, now it's not in the object, so there's no hourly rate field in the row object anymore. So Coda did not remove this column for us, but we can remove it ourselves, and the same would happen if we renamed the original column. So yeah, now we have the base table synced. But now we are stuck with the base table that now we are stuck with the base table that we just hit the columns, and so this base table is not representing what data we have in this table. So if we look at it and okay, we have DB teachers, 3 teachers, okay, but then we take DB teachers, DB teachers count, and the count says 4, right? Because the table itself, it still contains all those 4 rows. It's not a view that we filtered. It's a table that we filtered, and filters on the table, they only like they don't limit the data in that table. They just apply on the front end side for the display purposes. We can filter on the base table. It's not a view. On a view, yeah, indeed, the filter dictates what data set, what subset of rows we have in that view. And when you reference a view, you reference only that subset of rows. But with base table, so well, generally, if you've been to some of my, the best practices showcase, it's like the number one principle overall is to never have a base table in that state where you cannot tell easily. You need to spend time to tell that there is some data hidden from it. It does not show all the rows and it does not show all the columns. So it's like principle number one for making base tables. You have all the columns. Unhidden, right? You have all columns unhidden, all columns visible, and you have all rows visible in your base tables. If you wish, you can create a view, so everywhere over your doc, if you want to filter teachers down to explore, like just filter like classes for just one teacher, please don't be lazy. Create yourself a view, filter it to all your heart's desire. Do not touch the base tables. So this is like the very important principle. I see that some clients often violate this rule, but they violate this just to have these very quick maintenance filters. So they are like looking for all classes by teachers who are not active. It's okay as long as you delete that filter, or as long as you're the only person working on the doc and you're okay with it. The biggest problem that will happen if you don't do that, and especially if you have multiple people collaborating on your doc, is that it will get confusing. It will confuse someone, that someone will spend time understanding what's happening, why there are not all the rows visible. They may start writing a formula and see a different result from what they see in the table because they assume that the table was filtered. If some columns are hidden, they will, and they need the same calculation. They will not even look into the fact that there are hidden columns. This is not like, it's not in your face. These things are hidden. So you see a table with just 2 columns, you would assume there's nothing else in this table, or you will not really go and look, and you don't have to go and look what columns are hidden or what data is in these columns. Or let's imagine we hid these 2 columns. Some person will come and try to improve this table, build something else to this table. They may go and unhide the columns without even knowing that now they will be, that there's some other docs reading from this table through crossdoc. And when we hit those columns, we tried to limit what was cross-docked to that another dock, and they would turn them on, unaware that some other docks are reading from it. And even though we don't have this here, yeah, I can sync again, we don't have this column here, the hourly rate and is active column. You may, okay, re-edit it again, re-edit them again. You may delete these columns from your receiving dock and think that, okay, you just hit some sensitive piece of information, but in truth, that sensitive piece of information is still in the row object. So you share this. This is shared with everyone with whom you are sharing this dock. So this is in the row object. It's not an added column, but you can still have this information. It's still in there in your dock. So depending on that rule, do not hide anything from the base tables, because you will get confused when you need to update them. And the fact that if you cannot hide, you are not really flexible with what you can cross-dock. So let's say there's no personal information in the dock yet, so there's nothing you would like to hide, and you carelessly import your base table into the cross-dock, into the receiving dock. But there is no guarantee that in a week or in a month or later down the road, you wouldn't want to add this information to the table. And right now it's easy. We can just delete the table, make a view, import the view, right? But if you already have a huge setup that's dependent on that teacher's column, or on that teacher's table, on that view of the teachers, and you only now realize that, okay, I need to add some columns to the teacher's table, it will be a huge pain. And let's say there's like a lot of tables now depending on teachers in here. It will be a huge pain rewiring everything, deleting the table that you have here. Maybe you already have some views set up on it, you have some layouts set up for it, some extra columns added for it, some calculations. You would have to go and update it in every single place where you used to have a base table imported. That's why the rule number one of crossdock, the best practices rule number one of crossdock, is to always create views for your tables that you are going to surface, you're going to expose through crossdock. I call them with prefix out, and then table teachers for which dock? For scheduling. This is free form, right? This is for you to easily first, and I often add this icon, export. So there, any icon that has an arrow coming out of something would work, but just because these rhythm with the squarish, the rectangular icons of database, that's why I'm just using this rectangular sort of an icon. Like here with input in icons, I use a red one with arrow coming into the square, and here I'm using the orange one with an arrow coming out of the rectangle. And I create a view of our DB teachers, and previously I used to put these export views in a separate folder somewhere, like in a separate subpages, pages tree. And then some clients of mine, actually, I saw him or her, I don't remember actually. I saw them doing it like this, doing the sub pages of the database itself, and I thought it was really smart, because you group by table, you group these things by table, you don't have a huge list of exported pages that you still need to read through. You can you know where to go if you want to edit a particular view, you know, well, that you need to look into this. So I really liked that thing and adopted it for myself. And here we can set up our view. Add filter is active, is unchecked, is checked, and we hide the is active because it's useless, and the hourly rate we also hide. And now in the scheduling doc, we only sync the teachers. Out helps us find so the separate prefix helps us find the view out of this big list of everything. So there's gonna be a section out, 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 out. You could, I don't know, could have any other prefix. I don't know, an underscore. It will put it in the top. And yeah, if you have like a teachers for some other doc and then teachers for scheduling and teachers for something, the name convention lets you quickly spot the doc that you are the table that you are willing to import. Yeah, it gives this the name of the export. I often just rename it back to in teachers so that it reflects the page name, and I'm also using this prefix in. I could have been using the prefix db, but the reason why I'm using a separate prefix, I think it's more of a historical one than a logical one, because this is basically a database. The only reason, I guess, I'm using an in prefix to tell this apart from so to these tables I can add rows, modify rows, delete rows, right? And with these tables I cannot modify or delete rows or add rows to these tables. And well, using a separate prefix, I guess, is just a reminder for myself when I'm typing a formula that I cannot really modify anything in here. But this is just a recommendation for you. It's not like you have to totally obey it. It's not a hard spoken rule. So yeah, and now we have a view, right? We have a view of teachers. We do the same with students. We have our students, we perhaps add, and now we can do whatever. We can add even more personal data, like teacher email, and we can put here some emails for the teachers. The view will be unaffected by these columns, so that's why it is a very good idea to have, for cross-doc export, to have to make views and import views, only views, because you can then independently set each view to show only the data that is okay to expose to that particular doc. So maybe there's a doc like admin doc that has all the data again imported from different docs. It will be okay to expose another set of columns into this doc, but for this doc, or maybe there's gonna be some other like teacher maintainer doc, they should not know their hourly rate, but they should know their email. You would have a separate view for that doc, set with a separate set of fields and maybe with another filters in place or no filters at all. That depends on your needs. And before we go any further, and I'll reiterate on that in like half an hour or like 20 minutes when I get to that point. It's very tempting to start reusing the same export view in multiple docs, and I did that in a few docs. So I had like a list of students for any backend doc, so I know that, okay, in this and that doc, it's not a problem if there's some field that we don't need in that doc, but there's a view already that more or less satisfies our needs. So I was importing one view, like one export view, into multiple docs. There may come a moment in a year or a year and a half, like it did with me, when you realize that you actually want to have a different view. Like for one backend doc, you want to link all the students with these columns, but for another backend doc, you now only want to link the most recently active students only, because it has grown so big that you cannot afford to load the whole data set. So another very good very good practice is, again, to not be lazy, and if you want to load the teachers table or the subset of teachers or some portion of the data from the teachers or any table into yet another doc, even if it's the same thing at the moment, even if it's the same, totally the same number of rows and the same columns, please do make a separate view, and you will thank yourself later when it turns out that you want to, as I said, limit one view but not the other, or show something in one view that you absolutely cannot show in the other because, well, requirements change, the data volume grows, some doc may grow faster than the other, you'll be thinking of you'll have everything in place, so you have all the UI, you have everything, and you won't really have any resources to invest in rebuilding the doc or moving it from Coda to any other scalable platform. So you will want to keep using Coda for a bit longer, for still a year or two or whatever time. And you will want to limit that window of data only to, so this is the doc that you live in every day, right? And you don't need the historical data anymore from the classes, from the students that used to take classes a year ago, 2 years ago. They are not relevant anymore. And you will want to limit that data set. But then you find yourself reusing the same view both in the sales doc and in the scheduling doc. And in the sales doc, you cannot absolutely remove these old students because you need to keep track of all the historical sales in that doc, for instance. So, and this is absolutely what's happening right now with one of my clients. I need to take time, I guess I'll take time today to re-architect one of the docs, the sales doc, exactly with that issue. It's growing big now. Need to find the way to limit down the data that's in there without compromising on any statistics or anything else. So make yourself a favor, and for every doc that you're going to import a view of a table, make a separate view that you can then set up separately. You will thank yourself later. So record that rule. This is important. Okay, we have teachers, we have students. Don't have anything now on the students, but as I said, you create a subpage, you create a view out students for scheduling, and so far we just cross-doc all the students, but we don't know what will happen in a year. Students for scheduling, and don't forget to include these UID columns because we will need them later. Don't forget to include them. Okay, in students sync. Also, it's important to also know that it's best if you do this from the very start like this, because what happened now, whenever you import a table from a doc, whenever you use a cross-doc, well, you drag a table from another doc in here, it creates yourself a new connection, an API, so cross-doc works through an API, and for this access control, it creates a separate connection to that specific table or that specific view in that other doc. And if you go into your account settings, you can see all the list of all the tokens that were ever created under your account. So each one of these, except the strangely named ones, but the read-write access to something within something, read-write access to something within something, there is a cross-doc connection behind each of these things. So it creates, every time you import a table, it creates a connection. If you delete the table, import it again, it doesn't try to find an existing connection, it just creates one more connection. And the thing is, they are not deleted from your doc. they are not deleted from your doc automatically. So I deleted the DB teachers import directly from the base table, but it's still here, the read-write access to DB teachers within teachers. So it's not, you have to go and manually disconnect it. So if you ever do this, it's better to not import things that are not meant to be imported at any times into this doc, so that you don't have to go and clean this up. But if you first import the base table and only then realize you made a mistake and you import a view, you have to go and disconnect these things, because what's the risk of not doing that? The connection is still here, the connection is shared. Right now it's just set to view data, so no take actions. So even if someone, a bad actor who has access to this doc, use this connection, they cannot delete or modify or, well, tamper with the data in the base table. But what they can do, they can use this connection to read everything from that table. I don't have a practical example to show to you. Maybe it's not as simple, but there is a theoretical possibility, because the connection is still shared. It kind of surfaces the API key, maybe not directly, but I think you can somehow get it. I have a feeling that you can somehow get it. And this means that, yeah, if you keep these connections in the doc to the base table, and then you unfilter the base table, this means that a person, any viewer of this doc, potentially can get all the data from that base table through this connection that you left in your doc. I need to, well, I do the sync of students here. We created out students for scheduling. We find this search for a doc. It could also work search for a table. I don't know why they didn't add that functionality. But anyway, we have our students. We have our out students for scheduling. We drag it here. It just created us another connection, read-write access to DB templates within teachers. And while we're at it, another best practice that I often tell my clients, see how these connections are created under my account. So whoever is dragging that table into the doc, whoever is making that sync table, whoever is making that connection, gets so the API key is created under their account. For this particular example, it's not a big problem because I'm an admin of my own workspace, I'm not going anywhere, and these are for educational purposes anyways. But imagine there's a company and a company hires a consultant like myself, and I go and I set up all the crossdoc, and then I leave, right? So I do the job, I take my payment, and then I leave. And first, there's a lot of connections hanging around in my account, which I like. They clutter my connections, they clutter my account page. I'm not particularly happy about it, but let's say I don't care. Next thing is I get revoked, the access gets revoked for me. So I stopped working for that company, they remove me from editors, or they unshare the doc with me, and I don't know what will happen to these connections. I have a feeling that they will stop working because I don't have access to that object anymore. So I have a feeling that all the connections that I set up under my account will just stop working. Or another scenario is I will have to stay a maker, or I don't know, a person in their workspace. The workspace will forever stay in my list of workspaces. They will be paying for me, or maybe an editor access is enough and they will not be paying for me, but the workspace will still clutter my list of workspaces. And generally they cannot unmake me an editor at that point, so I cannot really move on if there's still connections under my name. So I think first Coda needs to rethink this whole thing and not make these connections, that's like wishful thinking, not make these connections under any user's account, but there needs to be some workspace-wide repository of shared accounts, of shared API access tokens, etc., so that it's not like dependent on a person. But what I oftentimes advise clients to do is to create a separate account for their workspace, something like Coda admin at their name, at their domain. So a totally separate admin account. And only use that account, so we know that, okay, this is going to be a separate maker account. It will be used to create docs, so that you don't have to, the docs will not become read-only. We know that this is going to be an account that they will be forever paying for. And if anything, it can be the only account left that's paid in the workspace, the maker account. Everyone else can be an editor. If anyone wants to make any changes to their CRM, they can just sign in as that admin account. Well, often people want to create docs, so there's going to be more makers of those smaller docs. But if we are talking about this one big doc, one big CRM built on Coda, or one big, I don't know, task tracker, whatever, it's a very good idea to have an admin account, a dedicated admin account, and set up all the cross-doc connections on that admin account only. So they would give me the password to that account, I would sign in as an admin, set up all the connections, and then just sign out when the time comes, forget the password, but the account is still there, they have access to it. So that's how that's a very reasonable thing to do when you are setting up cross-doc connections. You don't want them to stop working once you start relying on them. I think I'll make another short break, go get my tea. I think it's brewed already, and generally need to catch some breath. Oh, I forgot to turn off the mic. Well, you know these popping paper, the packing, bubble wrap. Yeah, bubble wrap they call it. So a shipment arrived today, and it has the nicest bubble wrap. It's so soft. It's so softly poppable. Like, enjoy it so much. We can do next thing. I'm thinking down to hosting ASMR streams, I guess. If this Patreon doesn't work out, that you get tired of Coda, or if Coda, God forbid, closes down, I know what I'm doing next. Hosting these ASMR streams where I'm making gentle whispers and noises, and I'm popping, and I'm scratching on the wrap. I'm investing in a better microphone. Yes, the age of ASMR videos has passed. I know they were really popular like in 2017 or something. Fun fact, that would be me if I were hosting a live stream 2 weeks ago. That was my voice pretty much 2 weeks ago. Yeah. It says kitchen timer, but it gives me high school vibes. Gosh, please take this from me. I have no one at home to take this away from me. Um, gosh, I have like 12 sheets of this bubble wrap. I think I only popped 2 or 3 so far. So I'll finish this stream earlier than yesterday, and I'll have all the evening to my, and I'll indulge myself in some bubble wrap popping. Yeah. Okay, so we imported this, we imported that, and we want to make a table of classes. That's basically, we are scheduling, right? We are scheduling teachers with students. So we have in teachers, like teacher, we have a multiple students. In students, do we have it? We forgot to probably rename it. Or it didn't pick up our renaming changes. See how this thing, well, there's some issues with. So you start renaming, and then if you move directly to another page, it discards the change. So you first have to like type in db classes something, then you need to unfocus while still on this page, only then move to another page, only then the change will be saved to the table, so to the table name. So yeah, sometimes I want to do it faster. So yeah, we have teacher, we have students, and oftentimes we will have some interface around this table, but we don't care at the moment. So we have, let's say, teacher Jonathan L, and students are this. We have also some start time. We have some classes. Jonathan Scott teaches these two lads. Then Joe teaches these at like 10:30, and well, we don't have any more active teachers. So Jonathan teaches these two, like on the 24th at 1 p.m. So okay, let's keep it like minimum. So we have, let's say we have here one student, and let's say we have two students here, and just so that no one is offended, I'll the remaining two students I'll just add them wherever. So Michael goes here and Nick goes here. So let's say it's like that. Display value, not really important for this. For this example, what we say, it's start time, new line, teacher name, new line, students, argument. The first argument is a new line, which is character 10. Then teacher name. Oh no. First it's the start time, teacher name, students name, joined by a comma and two text. So we have our summary for each class. So the date and time. We have the teacher and we have the students names joined by and just notice how I never used a single to text anywhere here, or I'm not joining on the students themselves, but I'm actually dereferencing the column that I'm interested in. I'm using to text in the end so that we don't have this formatting remaining. So if you remember, this looks similar to the one without to text, but this takes this much space only because there's the date value that we are inserting. And this will take this much space, and even fewer because it tries to represent the string as an object. It's going to be literally this much space as we have here. So that's why we do the whole format thing to string. But if we want to preserve links, of course, and bold formatting and whatever, we of course don't do that. But this is a display value, so we are pretty much not interested in keeping it bold or whatever. Yeah, so now this display value has a summary. And now we want to, so yeah, we have these classes, and now we want to cross-dock them to our teacher's dashboard. So let's say there is going to be, just imagine there is going to be an interface where teachers, so this is a doc for internal team who does the management of classes, who does the scheduling of classes. And then there's going to be a doc that's shared with teachers. Each teacher assigns into this doc, has a filtered subset of classes just for them. It's okay that we cross-doc them all. We don't need each teacher to have their own doc, because it's not a big deal if they know each other's classes. Let's say that it's irrelevant for our business if they know it or not. But what they should not have access to, they should not have access to the scheduling doc, because they should not be able to modify with any means. They should not be able to reschedule anything without contacting someone from the team. So they should only have like a read-only, a view-only mode, a read-only mode on the subset of data that's only given to them. So there's more going in this internal doc. Let's imagine that. So there is a valid, what I'm saying, there is a valid case that we only want to, use cross-doc and have a separate doc for all the teachers, so that they don't see this internal scheduling doc. Because yeah, we are tracking like classes that happened, didn't happen, bonuses, feedbacks in this doc, and all other things that teachers should not see. So yeah, we are making an out classes for teachers dashboard db db classes. We store the UID, of course, the display value, we can have it, we can reconstruct it on the receiving side, whatever floats your boat. My general consensus is that you reconstruct as little, you pass over only the minimum information that you need, and then on the receiving side you can reconstruct these things. I just have a feeling that it will result in a slimmer doc. Calculating that instead of having that big chunk of data in the row object, hanging around in the row object. So yeah, well, depends. If it's a heavy calculation, then of course it's pre-calculated, so it would be a sin to waste teachers' processor time to recalculate this again. We want the teachers to like this doc, to like working through this doc, so it should be a smooth experience for them. Okay, and let's say we set up this for our final import into our teacher's dashboard. So this is the doc that will receive the classes. And you type sync. And this is the most interesting part. The most interesting part now begins. And I think I shall be done with it in like 30-40 minutes. And that's gonna conclude our today's lesson. I'll go pop some more bubble wrap. And maybe finally go to bed at an adequate time. Okay, we imported the classes, and immediately you can see that teachers and students are not imported. Previously, there used to be this button to sync that table here. I think there used to be this button to sync that table here as well. And you may think, okay, let's sync in the students, right? Well, we have this out students for scheduling. Let's just imagine that we sync this, okay? I thought I had multiple bans actually. So no, we only have one ban in my Patreon. Yeah, we synced the students for scheduling, but these haven't resolved, right? What happened? Why? No, because it's not this table. It's the table from the so the reference. Remember that I told that it was now a different table. So we synced here the students. It used that view as a source, but this here is a totally different table, a created table with a different table ID and with all the different row IDs. Okay, as we said, let's make a view of this page and of this table. So out students for scheduling. But okay, before we do it, I hope that you already realize that it is a moronic step, that it is a bad step that will also solve nothing. So you create now a view of this cross-dock table, and let me just spare some time and say that this will not solve the issue either. So if you, but just for the sake of, again, showing this very quickly, we create a view for a table. We try to import it now from the, let's reload the docs. We try now to import it from scheduling. So there is out students for scheduling from this doc, from the scheduling doc. And again, it doesn't resolve the references because it's a view, and the references, they all have the table ID, row ID identifiers. The view, we have no guarantee here actually that, and besides, it's a view of a sync table. So we don't have any guarantee that this view will have all the rows that are referenced here. So in a way, it could work. Coda could make it work so that you had a view, and that's how it would import these things by association. But, well, the truth is, and you would see this if, for instance, in students and teachers, if in students I had an import from teachers, not through the third doc, you would see this issue. These references will resolve only if you import the base table, which in our case is, and not the base table from the original doc, not the base table from teacher's doc even, or from the student's doc even, but the base table from the doc where this base table is in. So only when in classes, the DB classes, has these references from this table, and it's a separate table. It's not linked to the students table anymore. It's like a new table. So this reference here is a reference on this new table. It has the ID, the row ID and table ID of this table. And so these things will only resolve if you import the base table. That's a cross-doc from a cross-doc, and in early days of cross-docs, and if you change anything here, this has to first sync into here, and then only then it will sync in here. And, well, it's a different table that can have a different set of columns, as I said, added columns, changed columns, different formulas. So, and this is what happened almost with everyone who used crossdock in its early days. I guess that's the reason why they renamed this import table button from here, because what previously happened, people who were trying to use crossdock, they saw these missing references, they saw that there was an add table. It added them a base table from the same doc as this is cross-docked from, which could be a cross-dock of a cross-dock. And literally when I started working for that startup, that online teaching platform, there used to be a table that was a cross-dock of a cross-dock of a cross-dock. So the students were cross-docked into the teacher's doc, then it was cross-docked into the sales doc. Just because of that, people were bringing in tables by association so that references would work. And in the end, you would get that table in the final end-of-line doc, and it would be a cross-dock of a cross-dock of a cross-dock of a cross-dock sometimes. So this is a bad approach until they fix it, until they allow resolving references from views and not just the tables, and from views from the original table. Here is the correct approach. First, always import, and that's again, write it down. It's a very important rule. Number 2, always import tables from where they are originally stored. So we will have in teachers, we will have in students, in teachers, in teachers, in students, and in classes. We make another view in the teachers doc, teachers for scheduling, teachers dashboard. We make students another view for students for teachers dashboard. In our, so yeah, we don't need this anymore. In our teachers dashboard, we go and read these views directly from where the tables originally are. So from in teachers. Teachers, we read from teachers for teachers dashboard. Yeah. And we wait for the table to appear here, because if we switch the page too early, what we can get is the table will not load, or it will load into a different page. That's what may happen. Same for students. We load them from the students table. Teachers have loaded, students is loading. Then how do we connect all of this? We could, well, we have teachers. What we could do, we could create a column which reads from in teachers, like this is like an untrue teacher, this is a true teacher. We could write a column that takes db or in teachers filter. But how do we find a fitting teacher? Well, we have, from here we can only get the name. So the name, the label is only, the display value is only shown here. So it's not necessarily even the name. Name equals teacher to text and first. And well, that would work in fact. But first, it would only work as long as, first, you don't have teachers with the same names. Like, that's why I said I thought that we had two bands among our students. But no, we don't. So this by to text matching. So this thing is wrong. It's just wrong. It's plainly wrong, because you don't know what will be the display value for the teacher here. It may happen that here you decide for a teacher to concatenate their ID, or I don't know, ID and the name, or name, and then in the brackets you will concatenate the number of students that this teacher has, because you want to have, like here, you want to have some summary available, because this is what you'll see in these selection boxes. And once you do that, once you change your display column, the to text will stop working. It will return the text of that display column at the matching on the name will stop working. And let's say you change your display, so you'll have to go and bring that display column value over here, and at some point it will get out of sync. So again, as I said, if you concatenate here in teachers the number of students that each teacher has, even if you sync all the students and you have all that information available here, there will be sync issues when something synced half an hour ago and something hasn't synced yet. So the display value will be calculated differently, perhaps, or it will be synced differently from multiple sources, or even from the single doc, from multiple tables. There is no guarantee that changes will sync at the same time. Some changes from one table can come later than changes from another table. So this is not a reliable way to do it. It's okay if you can do this for brief moments, and if you know what you are doing. If you, for instance, are bringing data from one doc into another, or you are absolutely sure that these will match, then of course you can save yourself some trouble and not do what I'm going to do next. But generally, and we're talking about you don't know what to do if you're not totally sure what you're doing. Generally, the best practice is, that's why these UIDs are here. In your classes, you select the UID of your teacher, you insert the UID, and these are just, students.uid. It returns from a list of students, it returns a list of UIDs. Student UIDs, for instance. And in your export view, you don't cross-dock these, but instead you cross-dock these. Teacher UID and student UIDs. For like literal values, the start time, whatever, feel free to just cross-dock it as is, but instead of references, cross-dock row IDs, row UIDs, whatever identifiers that will identify that row uniquely. And now you can refresh this thing. And now this is not relevant anymore. This is not relevant anymore. We cross-dock teacher UID. And now we can link by UID equals this row teacher UID and students. Multi-lookup is going to be in students, filter UID in student UIDs, or student UIDs contains UID, or UID contains student UIDs. Either way, I just think it's more expressive to write it this way. And no first, because there can be multiple students, right? And this is how you link things together when you cross-dock them into a different doc. So this is the technique, and please apply it pretty much every time you need to get data from, even if it would be from a single doc, even let's say it would be a single doc, the scheduling doc is your single private doc, and you have teachers and students all in this doc. You're not getting them from the third-party docs. Please still follow this approach, import the views, because otherwise you won't be able to link them together. Remember, the links, the references only resolve if you import the base table. But we do not import base tables because we want to retain flexibility on which columns we export, which rows we export, without doing that, without limiting the data on the base table. We keep the base table unfiltered and with no hidden columns at all times. We create separate views. We import the views and we link by row IDs. So this is the technique that's pretty much bulletproof. Otherwise, you may run into issues. You will run into issues if you're a beginner with this. This is the bulletproof thing. Even if some data does not link already, it will link eventually, but these things will be cross-docked, and the link will resolve after the data comes from other docs. So this is the approach for that. Now I wanted to talk a bit more about I don't know if I still have time for that. I know that I still have like 50 minutes on this stream. I'm very inclined to take a short break again, and I want to talk about what to do if we need to get data back. So we need to add some metadata to students, for instance, or we need to, and then if I have time, I will talk about a bit about cross-doc actions. Let's make a very short break now. The reason for the break is that I, again, have to unclog my nose. I guess you're expecting some interval act from me, but there's nothing that comes to mind. So 2 minutes 24 seconds left. Oh, yeah, the mic. Yeah, I'm getting increasingly tired here. So this, we talked about this a bit, but now what if there is a need to get something? So let's say we know that there are classes. So we have in our scheduling doc, we know that, for instance, the we want to know. So we okay. My tongue is twisting now. There is a need to keep track of which students a teacher teaches. So, and we only have this association in our scheduling doc. So we, in our teacher's doc alone, we don't know that Jonathan teaches this many students, or we don't have that in the student's doc either. So the association is managed on the scheduling doc side. And yeah, well, since our in teachers is a separate table, we can now just have something like db classes filter where teacher equals this row and take all the students and list combine them, because each cell, it's a list of cells and each cell can be a list of students, so we need to combine them into a single list and make them unique, and also filter for any is not blank, because, well, if there is a class and has a blank student, the blank will appear on the list of students, right? So this is all students, like all students for this teacher. Let's say this is the logic how we collect which students this teacher works with. Normally there will be a separate table where you will track each teacher. So that's what we have. We have a separate table for everything. So a student class, each student, there is a row for, like if a class has 4 students, there's going to be 4 separate rows for each student, because for each student we track time differently. We track the sale, that we take the hours from the balance or something. So whether it's a trial student or not a trial student, it's paid differently or not. So we have all these things that are specific per student for each particular class, right? And that thing, I just don't want to go very complicated in this demo, because it's not relevant really here. Where's the db students in students, and it's a multi-select. But normally you will have some separate table, like each teacher-student relationship, and you will track it there, like how much time they spent together, how many lessons they've had, how long since they've started working together. So all those things. If you need to have some extra data, you will create extra tables, and then this will be a formula reading perhaps from that other table, not from directly the classes. But let's say this is the case, and we need for each teacher here, we need to get that information. So how do we do that? We do not read from this table now, right? Because what we said, we don't want to end up in a situation where we are reading from a cross-doc of a cross-doc. Yeah. So what shall happen? This is our source of truth, right? So the teacher's doc hosts a teacher's table, which is our source of truth of all the data about teachers. We are not reading here the in teachers from that doc just because I said so. It is a very key principle to only have truth in one place, so that you know that if you go to that place, you do not have to go and collect pieces of data from different places. So you don't have to go here to get the teachers, like private information, and go into scheduling to find the teachers, association information and something. So ideally, you have a single place where all the data comes in together. How do you do that? So what is the right decision here? You create from in teachers, you create an export view, a subpage, which you can call, so again, it's an export view, out teacher. Just give it a gosh, just give it a characteristic name. So teacher, students. Doesn't necessarily, you don't have to, if it's long enough and it's characteristic enough, it helps you understand what this means, because this is going to be really a very small table. So the table is going to be in teachers, a view of in teachers, so teacher students. You only include the UIDs of the teacher, no need to include the name. And students, what do we do with students? Right, we also, for all the students, we take the array of their UIDs, students UIDs. We hide this, we don't cross-dock this. Here, don't forget to unhide that column, because we added it elsewhere, but it's still in here and it's hidden. And we have this out teacher students, and we cross-dock it back into our teachers doc. So we have our import, a page for our import view. And from our scheduling doc, we link this. And notice that we don't have to link students themselves in here, because we don't care about the students in this doc. Maybe whoever is managing the teacher's doc does not even have to have access to the students database. So, well, students UIDs, we know that this teacher has 5 students, this teacher has 2 students, 3 students, and so on. So this can be not the student UIDs, this can be the students count, doesn't matter. Whatever you need to get back into the source of truth. So maybe a students count, because, well, speaking of the classes, if we cross-dock all the classes here, we can just combine this data here, right? We can here for teachers, we can pull out all students from all the recent classes. But imagine you want to have this data on all classes, right? All students for all the time, or maybe you use that third table for collecting these associations. And in teachers dashboard, they only get the future classes, or the classes that happened yesterday, today, and in the future, but all other classes are filtered out. All past classes here are filtered out, and there is not enough information to collect this. So you cross-dock this back into the teachers doc, and then on your DB teachers, you can, what you do, you find a fitting row from, well, it should be called in teacher students. On your DB teachers, you find a teacher students row. So here you load the in teacher students filter, where teacher UID equals this row UID. So we find our teacher, our entry row. And from this teacher students record, we can now by association get the student UIDs for that teacher. And now if we want to surface that teachers for the teacher's dashboard, we go and unhide that column, right? And when we go into the teacher's dashboard, and I know this sounds like a lot of extra work to set it up. Like, it was much easier if you just imported all the base tables, but as I explained, as I was trying to explain, teachers, as I was trying to explain and repeat again and again throughout this stream, there is a reason why we are doing this, because if we are not doing this, we are compromising on something. We are compromising on data safety, or we are compromising on data integrity, or we are compromising on having a setup that's super tangled. We are reading from multiple things. We are treating this doc as a source of truth, for everything if we're cross-docking from there and not from the respective sources of truth. We don't have that setup that we can be confident in when we just start connecting anything with anything. Having a system like this, even though it is overhead, yeah, it is setting up all these row IDs, all these extra columns, all that seems like an extra work. And maybe for scenarios where you are just building your, I don't know, shopping list for you and your significant other, of course you don't have to do this. Or if you're building something small, a wiki, something that's not that relevant, maybe a wedding planner for your family whom you will not really share with anyone except your family. Then of course go ahead, no need to be that accurate about each step, but knowing a system like this or having a system like this and just having faith in, okay, Paul said this would work, I don't have enough confidence to try and implement it otherwise. Paul went through a lot of how do you call it? We call it through thick and thin, and found that by experience that this is the way to set these things up that works in a bulletproof fashion, that is maintainable, that is well understood. There's something that is very logical in the end. So if you're building a system to last, you're building your I don't know, a task management for a task management system for another for a few years. You're building your sales tracker, your anything, your contacts portfolio that you are sharing with someone. You're building a system like this for scheduling online classes. Adopt a system. It may not be exactly this system, even though, again, I tried it doing the different ways, and this is the only way that stuck, that really makes sense to do it this way. With even if we are having these round trips of, for instance, this data, we are going back from scheduling doc back to teachers to sync it to the dashboard, even though we could sync it directly from here. This is well, this pays off. Doing this pays off. Okay, this was about sync. Now what do we do if we, for instance, we have a teacher's dashboard, our teachers have their list of classes, and this is the last part, and I'm gonna talk a bit about cross-doc actions and not actions and what to do in this case. So, okay, you shared this doc with your teachers, right? And you want your teachers to, maybe you want to give them a check-in button so that they click, when they see that there is a lesson and the lesson starts, they click check-in, and I'll see if I still have energy to set that up. Let's just talk for a moment. So we need to track these check-in times, right? Or we need to give teachers some way to say, okay, I want to have an away day on this day or that day. Or we want to give teachers a way to set that, okay, I'm not available. We want them to be able to put a checkbox on this doc. So what do we do then? How do we go about that? There's two approaches, right? So, or actually three now that we have forms. We can give them a form to submit some data to some of our private docs and link that data from one of our private docs, right? But let's say we want these teachers to act upon these rows already, or we want teachers to just add their availability to this doc. And there's a few approaches. First approach is to give them a table here, or let them change, for instance, have the check-in time. Well, check-in time and date should be a time and date. Give them a button. and there's a few, yeah. One of the options is, yeah, you give them a button. Let me just code this button very quickly. This row, modify rows, check-in time now, and disable if check-in time is not blank. And check-in. Yeah, so this is our button. And there's two things. So we could have this button just set the value in here, right? The good thing is it's easy, right? You have this value set in, then you can create pretty much like we did it here. You can create, if you want to track this into some other doc, back into the scheduling of classes, or back into, or cross-dock it to some other doc maybe, because this, again, this does not have to happen. If you are not absolutely interested in these student UIDs in the student's doc, even though it makes sense to do this maybe, oh well, the teacher's doc, to cross-dock it back here and from here sync it there. You could, if you know what you're doing and you absolutely don't need this information in the teacher's doc, it's not something that's important for the teacher's doc, the number of students they are teaching or whatever, it's only important for, I don't know, the financial doc, maybe their bonus, monthly bonus depends on it. So you can take this and import it into some other doc directly. You will still, by having this link by the row UID, you can link it in any doc pretty much to the teachers. You can link it in any doc, so you don't have to sync it back to the teacher's doc. Even though if only don't link it back to the teacher's doc if there is performance things going on, or if you need this data to appear in that third doc as soon as possible, so you cannot afford to wait for this to be synced back into your source of truth, and then from here, perhaps in another hour, it will take another hour to sync into that third doc. So if you cannot afford that, don't do that. Sync directly to that doc where you're getting your data into, the financials doc, for instance. Or yeah, if the set here is huge and the subset here is small, so here's like only 5 teachers, but here's 1,000, no need to go and link it back to here. And yeah, in certain scenarios, it may make sense to just link it back there, to link it to that doc directly, to that other doc directly. The good news is that you can do that. You have the flexibility of doing that when you're linking by UIDs. So what we can do here, first, option 1, you create an export view and you link it back to the scheduling doc. So you have here an import view, pretty much like we're doing here, but the other way. We have an import view of these check-in times. It's easier to set up. The plus of this is that this doc, if you know that this doc will not go huge, will not exceed that limit, and this doc may exceed that limit, this connection will keep working, will still work, because reading from a doc that's under 125 megabytes, it's gonna work. But writing, putting data into the doc through a cross-dock action into a doc that's over 125 megabytes will not. So if scheduling is frequently going overboard over these 125 megabytes, but teacher's dashboard is not, it makes sense to go this way, because this way this data will be synced to this doc. The downside of this approach is that, well, this is still the data that's accessible by teachers, so nothing prevents them from going and, I don't know, post factum, after the class is done, go and spoil the data, break the data change the data for other teachers, tamper the data for themselves, put in some fake numbers here, so there is no guarantee that this, whatever's shared with teachers will stay, the data will stay, will keep its integrity. So nothing really prevents them from messing this up. So if you absolutely need this timestamp generation to happen on the backend side or have some validation in place, then you go with the cross-dock action approach. You create on your classes, you create your, you have your start time, you have your check-in time, you then create a button. And even that is not a super safe thing, because nothing really prevents from clicking that button later down the road using the same connection to set whatever value in here. So in a way, the most bulletproof way, but it's the most complicated one, is to have something like DB classes, to have something like a separate table of class check-ins. You have here a class UID, you have here a check-in time, for instance. From class UID, you will find the class. And what you have this database. You may make a subpage, or you may make a view of it. And now Coda, as we discovered in our previous live stream, hey Connor. Although I'm not sure if you can add rows to a view that's filtered out, but we can try and figure this out. So let's filter our So we need to create that connection first. So we go into the teacher's dashboard. We create the sync table class check-ins. We only need this to import this to create a connection, and we will make this connection a read and write access, because we need to write to this table, create rows in this table, take actions and view data. And let's see if we can actually and this is just a connection. It doesn't have any rows. We are not exporting any rows in here. But let's see if we can use this connection to add a row to that table. So add a check-in. You add a row to this read-write access to that connection. The table URL is, well, will this give us our table URL? No, because it gives us the URL of this table in this doc, but not the table in that doc. Okay, we can focus on it, take the URL out of here, and we don't have any row instances, so we need to go through some hoops to take the URL of the table, and we take the URL of that other doc, and we clean up this information This is our table or the view. And let's actually no, this is our section. After the pound button, this is where we have our table. TU means table or grid, and this is our table ID. And where do we have it? The scheduling doc. Yeah, class check-ins. This is something. This is not the table that we needed. Again, I made a view of a wrong table. DB class check-ins. We need to, yeah, it's a different table now. So this is 2DK7. And we need to, this is also a wrong thing now. So we need to re-import this. And this is something that we don't need anymore. So we have this, we take actions and view data. There's gonna be no rows in here. Class UID, what's the column ID? Here it is, here's the column ID. And let's see, maybe this will not work. Maybe this whole endeavor will not work. This is gonna be this row UID and another thing to remember, when you are inserting a row, updating a row, and you need to specify columns, do not specify their names, because names can change, and when names change, this will stop working. Always specify the column IDs. To get the column ID, one thing that you can do, you can click right and you will find copy column ID in the bottom. If it's not shown for you, you go into account settings, and in the very end of your settings, you have the labs and you have enable developer mode. You turn this on and you reload your doc, and then you will see your column IDs. There will be an option to copy table ID, copy column ID, etc. And this is our check-in time, yeah. And of course we deleted that connection, so we need to use another connection. And let's see if this will work. So we're trying to, yeah, sorry, but add row only works on tables for now. Yeah, we imported a view and it doesn't work. And if you absolutely need to make sure that you are actually, why am I doing this way? So if we are doing it with a separate table, so my plan here was to have this table populated, and after that, so yeah, it still doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work, scratch that. We are not going to import the base table. It would work if we created a connection on the base table, but per our rule number 1 or rule number 2, we are not importing base tables as cross docs. Never. We are only working with views. You can modify rows in a view. You can maybe add rows, or maybe you cannot. No, you cannot add row on a view. You need to have a full table for that. But what do we do then? We track check-ins like this right in here, and we cross-dock these check-ins back into the scheduling doc as a separate view. But instead of just taking the data and trusting it and linking it like here we did, we linked the student UIDs from the scheduling doc back to the teachers. We set up automation to process incoming rows, the rows that haven't been yet processed, and see if the data is valid, if the teacher is not trying to like set the check-in time to some unrealistic value, or set it when the class is already over, or these things. So this is currently the only way to do validation. You import the data into a separate table, and then you have some automation picking these incoming rows one by one and then applying that data onto your actual data. So this is a way to do validation if you need to have that. Regarding cross-dock actions, so let's say we wanted to have this check-in button directly modify the value on the schedules table, on the classes table, and we are fine with it. We don't need any validation. So here I don't have to show how this is set up because it's documented, and you can find it on the community, the guide to how to set this up. There's just one thing to keep in mind. First, when you do a cross-dock action, what happens on the receiving side is the server has to spin up the dock, open the virtual browser, process the dock, and only then, and it's put in a queue, and only then the change will appear in your dock. And it's almost instant. I mean, it's not almost instant, it's pretty fast. You don't have to wait an hour for data to, unlike here, you don't have to wait here an hour or do it manually and wait the data to appear in this dock to be linked to the whole data. But what may happen? First, the button, you will see it spinning for quite some time. So if this cross-dock action will take 10 seconds, it may take 10 seconds. If the dock is big, it may take like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. So we had some teachers reporting times like a minute. They clicked check-in, and they could effectively do nothing else with the dock because the action was still running. It was waiting for Coda to take this heavyweight, the 120 megabytes dock, process it, the scheduling dock, make the edit, and only then the button would be done. The action would go through. So this action actually blocks the dock. So if you do the cross-dock update or cross-dock add row, this may be a bad user experience to start with because right now it's not reproducible because this dock is small. So even if I set this up, I wouldn't be able to show it to you, and I'm not able to show it in my client's dock because it's a private dock, right? It's under the NDA. But we moved away from using cross-dock actions. But this is what you need to be ready to endure. This is what you need to be ready for. If you set up cross-dock actions to click a button in a different dock or update a row in a different dock, add a row in a different row. Make sure that it's okay that you click a button. It may take up to a minute for the action to go through, and it's okay that the user who clicked it can do nothing with this dock meanwhile. So this is the downside of using cross-dock actions. Meanwhile, here, the downside is that you're letting people track data in the dock that you shared with them, and you're effectively letting them tamper the data at any moment they wish, go and change some values in the column. But and you are losing that immediateness, immediately like near real-time changes, applied changes. But what you save, first, you may have that extra validation layer, so you're not letting people update the table directly, but you are importing some view as a separate cross-dock table. You can set up automation to react on the rows there, do the validation, decide if you want to apply or not apply these changes, and you have that. And the other thing that you have, people click buttons and go on with their lives. It's fast, and it's not their concern that it hasn't yet synced to your scheduling dock. And if you don't need this immediate response here, then you absolutely don't have to set it up like that. Again, this will not apply if you are sharing, you have like 12 teachers and you're sharing an individual doc with each of them. Of course, you will not be collecting 12 views into and set up 12 automations. You will not be doing that. then the only option that you have is either crossdock or using Zapier, Integromat, or some other integration tool to have to delegate this insertion to that tool so that the action is still instant. It like creates a row, then there's Integromat listening on row changes every 15 minutes or something. It picks that change, inserts it into another row, and you don't use crossdock, there is no delay, so that's another option. Use the third-party tool, but this comes with the disadvantage of using a third-party tool. Okay, this pretty much covers what I was trying to tell. I'm wondering if there are any questions from you to me, if everything is if everything is clear, if you have some specific cases in mind. I tried, in the first hour, in the first half an hour, I was talking more about the theory of how it works under the hood to give you some better understanding of why it works like that. Speculate a bit about where it may go next. Then I was showing how to connect things through crossdock. I probably, when I have some time, I will go and put timestamps under this video. It's going to be recorded on YouTube so that people can easily, or I can easily direct people to the proper timestamps when I'm talking about this or that part. And yeah, so far this is pretty much what I wanted to cover with crossdock. Waiting for answers from the chat. The chat is silent for now. Maybe there's some delay here. The delay used to be smaller earlier. It used to be like 10 seconds. Now it's something like a minute. And I'll be wrapping this up. Connor, Virginie, nothing. Cannot read anything from you. Am I live? Yeah, I am. 2 viewers. Used to be 3, but now it's 2. And I'm not even sure if it's just me or it's anyone else. So is anyone here? Hey, if everything is more or less clear, again, if you're watching this in recording, feel free to reach out either in the comment section below, post your questions, I'll make sure to answer, or on Patreon. Where's my private Patreon doc? So yeah, I feel like I am pretty exhausted already now, so maybe something comes to my mind later and I'll talk about this in one of my future streams. But this is once again, thank you for my patrons. Brano, hey, were you silent all this time on the stream or did you just join? I'm wrapping up, so if you don't have any questions, I'll wrap up. I want to talk to my girlfriend who's on her business trip and abroad, and I miss her so much. And I kind of think that it wouldn't hurt if I maybe booked the same hotel as she did and just stayed there and we could meet at least like in the evenings or something. Because she's on a seaside and I'm here in my 4 walls doing these things. I could be streaming from a hotel in Turkey just as well as I'm doing this from home, and could attend the online driving lessons, the theory, the lectures about driving rules just as well as I can do here. Okay, I didn't do this, so I think we are gonna go on vacation sometime. It's gonna be some dedicated trip. Okay, if there's nothing else, then see you on the next stream. My next stream is scheduled. Where is it scheduled? So again, thank you all my patrons for supporting my knowledge sharing endeavors. I hope that this word cloud grows as I am working towards that. I'm working on this content. Not much of it is private to patrons. I'm still sharing a lot. This was my idea all along, to share as much as I can. Yeah, next time is gonna be 2 p.m. Eastern European time. It's a different time for, it's gonna be some really basic implementation, so nothing advanced, nothing like we did here, nothing like we did with the Eisenhower matrix, nothing like we did with the patrons doc. What else did we do? Nothing like that. Very simple things like pulling out your summary for a quarter, pulling out your summary for the whole year, maybe finding a previous row, so talking a bit about that. Yeah. So it's 2 p.m. on Tuesday, Eastern European time. In Greenwich time, it's 11 a.m. And then, so right now it's UTC. Oh no, Greenwich time is UTC plus 1 now because it's summertime. So it's noon Greenwich. And well, in California Pacific time, it's minus 10 hours from us, I think, or 12 hours from us. So yeah, it's 10 hours, minus 10 hours. So now it's 10:55, it's 12:55 in California. Okay, see you on Tuesday then. Cheers and thank you.